My sister-in-law stood in the center of the mahogany conference room, her chin raised in a display of unearned triumph. "He's the eldest son," she demanded, slamming her hand on the table. "By right of birth, the $11 million estate, the family logistics company, and every single asset belongs to my husband. That is how tradition works, and that is what the law will uphold." I sat quietly across from her, slowly sipping my water, while my father's lifelong estate attorney, Mr. Harrison, stared at her over his reading glasses. The silence in the room stretched until it became physically uncomfortable. And then, Mr. Harrison did something I had never seen him do in all my years of knowing him. He began to chuckle. The chuckle grew into a hearty laugh that echoed off the glass walls. My sister-in-law's face turned from smug satisfaction to pure, unadulterated rage. She didn't know the truth. She had no idea who I really was, or what her husband had actually inherited. My name is Lauren Ross, and at 34 years old, I have spent a decade learning that discipline is the ultimate shield against chaos. As a military officer, I've navigated high-pressure deployments, but nothing quite prepared me for the toxic environment of my childhood home after my father passed away. My father was a self-made logistics giant, a man of quiet brilliance who built an $11 million empire from the ground up. We shared an unspoken, deep bond rooted in mutual respect and work ethic. On the other hand, my 38-year-old brother, Julian, was the complete opposite. He was lazy, deeply entitled, and spent his life floating on the luxury of our father's hard work. Julian's wife, Vanessa, was even worse, a status-obsessed woman whose greed knew no bounds. Ever since I joined the military, Julian and Vanessa treated me like an unimportant outsider, mockingly whispering that a soldier's salary would never buy me a seat at the family table. They viewed my absence as a weakness, assuming they had successfully pushed me out of my father's life. But while they spent years flaunting designer clothes on credit and ignoring my father during his final, painful months, they made a fatal error. They completely ignored the quiet trips my father made to visit me, and they had absolutely no idea what he and I had been building together in secret. They thought I was just a grieving bystander at my own father's funeral, but they didn't know our game had already begun. The funeral flowers were barely dry when the moving trucks of greed rolled in. I returned to my father's estate to find Julian and Vanessa already walking through the hallways, holding a pad of neon pink sticky notes. Vanessa was literally pasting them onto the backs of my father's antique leather chairs, his grandfather clock, and even the gold-framed oil paintings he loved. They weren't mourning, they were liquidating. Vanessa looked up at me, her eyes gleaming with cold calculation as she placed a sticky note on his favorite oak writing desk. "We have to be practical, Lauren," she said, her voice dripping with synthetic warmth. "Julian and I are planning to sell the logistics firm and liquidate these old properties to fund our new venture. Naturally, as the eldest son, Julian is the rightful heir to the entire $11 million empire. It's just the natural order of things, the bloodline tradition. I'm sure Dad left you some small sentimental keepsake, perhaps his old military medals, but the actual wealth must stay with the head of the family." Julian stood beside her, nodding smugly, already acting like a king surveying his conquered territory. Any other grieving daughter would have screamed, fought, or torn those pink notes off the walls. But I just stood there, letting my military training keep my expression completely blank. I slowly nodded, offering them a calm, polite smile. "If that is how you feel, let's meet at the lawyer's office tomorrow to resolve this." The air inside Harrison and Associates was thick with anticipation. Julian and Vanessa strutted into the conference room looking like they had already won the lottery. Vanessa wore an oversized designer coat, and Julian kept adjusting an expensive new watch, both clearly purchased on credit in anticipation of today's windfall. They sat down across from me with smug, pitying smiles, treating me like an unfortunate guest at their victory banquet. Mr. Harrison, my father's trusted estate attorney, sat calmly at the head of the polished mahogany table. He slowly looked up and adjusted his reading glasses. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice steady and professional. "We are here today to read the final will and testament of your late father." He barely finished the sentence before Vanessa stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. She slammed her palm onto the table, commanding the room with a look of supreme arrogance. "Let's skip the boring legal jargon, Mr. Harrison," she demanded loudly. "We all know why we are here. He is the eldest son. By right of birth, the $11 million estate, the logistics company, and all of his assets belong to my husband. It's tradition, and it's the law." The silence that followed was suffocating. I didn't flinch. I just took a slow sip of my water. Mr. Harrison stared at her over his glasses, his face completely expressionless for 3 agonizing seconds. And then, his eyes crinkled. A chuckle escaped his lips, quickly blooming into a deep, hearty laugh that echoed off the glass walls. Vanessa's smug smile instantly collapsed, her face turning a furious shade of crimson. "What is so funny?" she hissed, looking desperately between the lawyer and me. "Explain this insult now." Mr. Harrison slowly stopped laughing, taking off his gold-rimmed glasses to wipe away a tear of genuine amusement. He looked at Vanessa with a cold, piercing gaze that instantly silenced her complaints. "My dear woman," he said, his voice dripping with smooth legal authority, "I laugh because your grasp of both estate law and your own husband's financial reality is tragically non-existent." He leaned forward, tapping his fingers on the table before him. "Let's discuss the actual state of the Ross Logistics empire. Over the last 5 years, this company underwent a massive, quiet restructuring. While you and Julian were busy throwing lavish parties and buying luxury sports cars on projected earnings, your father was silently firefighting behind the scenes." Mr. Harrison looked directly at Julian, whose smug posture was beginning to stiffen. "Julian, your late father established a personal trust fund for you when you turned 25, valued at $2 million. However, over the past decade, your failed business ventures, from the luxury watch imports to the real estate apps, required constant bailouts. Your father kept meticulous records. Every single bailout was structured as an advance on your inheritance." Julian swallowed hard, his hand trembling slightly against his expensive new watch. "What does that mean?" he muttered. Mr. Harrison smiled thinly. "It means your personal inheritance trust has a current balance of 0. You've already spent your entire share of the estate." Vanessa gasped, her voice shrill. "That's a lie. What about the $11 million in assets? The company? The properties?" Mr. Harrison leaned back, enjoying the moment. "The $11 million in assets, including the logistics firm and all real estate, do not belong to the estate anymore. They were legally transferred into a master holding trust 6 months ago. And the person who holds absolute power and sole control over that master trust is not the eldest son. In fact, that person is sitting right across from you, completely silent, waiting patiently for this pathetic, greedy farce to finally end." The room fell into a stunned, icy silence. Vanessa looked as though she had been slapped, her mouth hanging open in disbelief as she stared at me. Julian looked entirely lost, his eyes darting frantically between me and Mr. Harrison. I set my water glass down, the soft click echoing in the quiet room. "You both always look down on my military career," I said, my voice calm, level, and entirely devoid of anger. "You told everyone I was just a simple soldier playing in the dirt, far too stubborn to ever understand how a real business worked. But you never bothered to ask what I actually did in the armed forces." I leaned forward, resting my forearms on the polished mahogany table. For the last 7 years, I have been a chief logistics officer, managing global supply chains and moving millions of dollars in equipment across international borders under high-stress conditions. Dad knew exactly what I was capable of. While Julian was bankrupting his divisions with terrible investments and demanding payouts, Dad was secretly calling me every week to help him untangle the mess. I watched Vanessa's hands begin to tremble. 6 months ago, when Dad realized his health was failing, he didn't turn to his eldest son. He turned to his logistics officer. He legally appointed me as the sole trustee and executor of the entire master trust. Every warehouse, every truck, and every dollar of that $11 million empire is completely under my control. I paused, letting the reality of my words sink into their desperate minds. If either of you want a single penny to save yourselves from the debts you've accumulated, you will have to beg me for it. But there is an even bigger catch waiting for you in this room. Mr. Harrison revealed the final devastating detail, laying out the stark terms in front of Julian. Your father knew you would try to claim your right as the eldest son, Julian. So, he decided to give you exactly what you wanted. He left you the physical headquarters building of Ross Logistics and the official title of president. Vanessa's eyes instantly lit up with a desperate, greedy hope. See, she shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at me. I knew it. The company is ours. The title is ours. But Mr. Harrison raised a hand, cutting her off with a cold, pitying smile. I wouldn't celebrate just yet, Vanessa. You see, the headquarters building was heavily leveraged by Julian's failing luxury watch division last year. It currently carries a massive commercial mortgage of $1.5 million. Because your father kept the business and property separate, whoever accepts the title of president and the deed to that building also legally inherits the debt associated with it. Oh, and the title of president comes with exactly 0 voting shares in the actual operating company, which is fully owned by Lauren's master trust. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. The realization hit Julian like a physical blow. If he accepted his grand inheritance as the eldest son, he would immediately inherit $1.5 million in crushing commercial debt with no business revenue to pay it off. If he refused, he got absolutely nothing. Vanessa's smug, triumphant face completely collapsed as she realized her own toxic greed had trapped them in a financial grave of their own making. They did not sign. They could not. Accepting the poisoned chalice meant instant ruin, so Julian and Vanessa walked away with nothing but their bitter humiliation. I cleanly severed all ties with them that very afternoon. In the months that followed, Julian was forced to sell his luxury cars and declare bankruptcy to escape his mounting personal debts, while Vanessa's high society social standing completely vanished into thin air. With sole control of the $11 million empire, I resigned my military commission to run Ross Logistics full-time, using our massive success to establish a major foundation that provides university scholarships for veteran families. Today, as I look out over my new high-rise office overlooking the city, I feel a profound sense of peace. I know my father would be incredibly proud. He taught me that true respect and leadership are earned through sweat, discipline, and honor, never inherited through a mere birth order or demanded by toxic entitlement. Now, I am curious to hear from all of you who followed my journey to the end. If you were in my shoes, would you have helped Julian pay off his massive debts, or would you have let him face the consequences of his greed? Comment below with your thoughts, and please let me know which city you are watching from today so I can see how far my story has reached. Do not forget to click on the next story on your screen. It will surprise you. Thanks.